Welcome to Keep the Line Moving Extras, where we take things further. Here we dive deeper into leadership, sports, and business. Each week we highlight our weekly guest, providing further insights from their leadership journey. Beyond the usual headlines, we uncover what truly drives success. From strategic thinking to personal growth, to inspiring teams and leading with purpose. Here we go. KTLM Extras Week 2. Here we go. What a week we've had. Jill Kelley was a tremendous guest on Keep the Line Moving earlier this week. She is the international sports and entertainment lawyer and my former colleague at the New York Jets, where she was general counsel at the Jets for a number of years. Let's get to some takeaways from Jill and that conversation that I think would be useful for you on KTLM Extras. Number one, Jill says, run your own race.
There are not a lot of international tax lawyers who have, gone into Indian country and then got into the NFL. So if I were to, have listened to advice that was like, you need to do this in your career and take, instead of just looking at opportunities and saying yes, when I didn't really know how the pieces were going to fit together, if I compared myself to what other people were doing at the time and like, oh, they're making partners at firm and, they're really successful, maybe I should be doing that. I wouldn't have had such, unique and joyful moments. And I wouldn't have met incredible people like you and all of the other people at the Jets and different organizations I've worked at. So it was really just, don't mind the noise of the other people and what they're doing in their lanes, just kind of run your own race. And there's a lot of different ways to, people think, oh, you have to be in sports forever to end up in sports. And that's clearly in my case, not true.
So much wisdom from Jill throughout our conversation, including this next point that she made. When sitting down with a client, the issue is not always on the surface. So it behooves you as a lawyer or a coworker or whatever it is in that interaction to really pay attention to what they're saying and to what they're not saying.
I take the time to really understand them and to hear about their families. I'm genuinely curious. And I think that there's, you can tell the difference in authenticity sometimes with people. And I'm not saying I've been perfect. And this comes from I've been practicing for 18 years. So, in the beginning, I was much more transactional and trying to get stuff done. But it's really hard to get to the solution without understanding what's really driving somebody, because a lot of times the problem that they come to you with isn't really the problem. There's something underlying it. And you need to kind of peel back the layers to figure that out, like what's really going on here. And it's that holistic approach that, it can be a bit more time consuming, but at the end of the day, I think you actually save time and you're more efficient because you get a sense of how to resolve future problems. You become that trusted advisor.
So many times with all of our guests, we talk about the concept of advocating for others and advocating for oneself. Here's Jill on that exact topic.
The other thing I think that's important in terms of advocating for myself is, knowing what my convictions are and being inconvenienced by them if need be. I remember the first time I heard that lesson was I read something by Hillary Crane, who was the former general counsel of Nike. And she said, she had advice to young attorneys to be, try to have a financial cushion. It's not possible for a lot of us, that are living paycheck to paycheck. But if you can, have one, because you need to be okay walking away when you have to make a painful decision, because you want to be confident that there's no set of circumstances that could ever force you to compromise on your judgment. Because you're going to leave that job, but who you are, that integrity you carry, your convictions, that is going to, follow you wherever you go.
If you haven't connected the dots just yet, I recommend that you listen to the entire episode with Jill, again, which we posted earlier this week. However, if you don't have time, here's Jill on a topic that comes up quite often in leadership situations and everyday corporate, which is how to deal with conflict.
Cultivating that trust is what, it cultivates the ability to have conflict too. And I would have people stop by where we disagreed. And when I use the word conflict, I don't mean like tension, which is different. I mean conflict like being able to collaborate and challenge each other on ideas. And I felt that that was important. It gave me perspective because I was coming into the sports industry as an outsider in a lot of respects. And again, I think that the word conflict can sound negative, but I think if it's constructive, it's about it's like the stress you put on working on a muscle, using the same example. It's you need a bit of pressure resistance to kind of grow.
One topic that Jill and I talked about that I thought was valuable to go a little bit deeper here on KTLM Extras this week, and that is going from an individual contributor to a leader. That transition is not easy. I shared my personal story in the episode. Jill talked about it. A lot of guests on the podcast talk about it. Why? Because it's very important and very difficult. All right, let's give you some tangible ways to help you through something that I've researched. Like I said, I've experienced, and I really pay attention to this transition because it's very, very challenging. Okay, we're going to start with a quote from John Tarnoff, who was our guest in episode 111 of Keep the Line Moving. Here's his quote, and this is our jumping off point today. He said, if he were to give advice to anybody getting a job today in 2025, he said the following: ask more questions, make fewer statements. Ask more questions, make fewer statements. Why am I bringing this up today? Well, number one, curiosity is paramount in making the transition from individual contributor to leader. We'll get to that in a second, but let's dive deeper into what John is saying. When we become a leader, it's a big deal, right? And we want to earn the fact that we were promoted from individual contributor to leader. So we want to show people we deserve it. We want to walk into meetings and make statements, definitive statements, becoming the smart person now because you're seen as the leader. You are the leader. But that's when people get into trouble. It's a mindset shift, right? When you're individual contributor to leader, what is the reality? You're still the same person. Tuesday, you were, as an example, a great graphic designer. Thursday, you're now assuming a new role as the director of the creative team. Just as an example, you're still the same person. Everybody knows you're the same person. So they're watching, the people that you are now leading are watching your movements and how you conduct yourself. If you change and start to become what John said, you ask fewer questions and make more statements. What is that? Think about it if it were you and you're seeing the leader now. It's off-putting. It's inauthentic, right? Another way, as a suggestion, is to be curious. Ask people questions. What do you think? How can we do this together? If your style is to do that privately, do it privately. In a collective setting like a meeting, do it then. But you have to be in one thing that if you take away today, the mindset shift is this: a continuous learner. Why were you promoted? You were promoted because you were really good at graphic design. So you studied that, you honed your skill, you thought about it, you took classes on it, whatever the case may be. Now you're leading people. That same mode of being a voracious learner and wanting to get better, that attitude and approach now has to apply to what is arguably the most important part of an organization: people to people relationships, motivating, coaching, mentoring, and inspiring people. Think about the great leaders that have led you. They have impacted you. How did they do that? They connected with you, they got to know you. Well, if you've never done this, leading people, you need to learn it. So that means continuous learning mentality, podcasts, books, journaling, meditating, getting in touch with your values, who you are, how will you show up? Back to John again, making fewer statements and asking more questions. That's the continuous learner. Okay. Stay the course. Back to your personality. Do not change. Be you. Be you even with more humility, because now you're the representation of the company to the people you're now leading. You affect their raise, their happiness, right, wrong, or in between. and the way they view their jobs, right? There's other contributions to that, right? Contributing factors, I should say. But you are now the main representative of that company. That's a major responsibility, because who are they going to have their performance review with? You. So it behooves you to get to know them by being open and allowing them to express themselves relative to getting the job done and doing great work, obviously. Okay. But if you change, they'll notice that and they won't open up. If you're open, show a little vulnerability. Hey, let's do this together. I'm figuring this out. It's not weakness, that's strength. And they'll trust you because you're being honest with them. This is new to me. I'm figuring this out. Thank you for giving me that support. Someone says that to you, what are you going to do? You're going to help them, right? That's human nature. Well, that's what's needed in this transition, right? You need to dive deep down into who you want to be, and it takes time. And that's the next point, being patient with yourself. This is not easy. And you're going to take, as I said in my story on the podcast this week, your lumps, right? It's going to be an up and down until you find your rhythm. But again, by listening, being curious, talking to folks, being transparent. And here's another valuable piece of information that I could share with you through many interviews with guests that are high-level leaders, through experience, and through research and looking at this. When you make a decision or create a top of the agenda initiative, explain why you're doing it. Provide the why. A good thing about going from individual contributor to leader is you have a clean slate. Perhaps you were frustrated with your leader that never would explain the why. Just trust me, this is what we need to do. In 2025, that doesn't work. You have to explain why you're doing things. You don't want to compromise senior leaders. You want to maintain that trust, but tell them what you can tell them. Tell them why you can't tell them something if that's the case, and say, this is what the organization believes is what is best right now. Let's go with this together. And the more you know your people, the more trust they'll have in you, and they'll understand that you can't say what you want to say, but you're giving them as much information as you can. Just saying, hey, we need to do this, that's the way it is. That might have worked at the turn of the century, or probably not even then, but it happened back then. It does not work now. So, in closing, I wish you nothing but the best. Remember this last piece. Somebody believed in you, coached you, mentored you, and you got promoted. Chances are they understood who you were. Well, guess what? Now it's your turn to figure out the same for others, and perhaps they can get promoted and go on and do great things as leaders themselves. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for being part of KTLM Extras Week 2. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.